Hi, folks. In this video on 4 ways trust breaks down and how it can be rebuilt, I want to get into the really practical applications of where trust wears thin in organizational settings, and which is to say where those settings become less inclusive and equitable, and sort of by definition, where are the spots and the ways that we can rebuild trust. So I want to introduce you to a definition of trust, which is a paraphrase of Margaret Urban Walker's, or it's not paraphrase, it comes from an alternative source, but I think it's compatible with Margaret Urban Walker's definition of trust. It's just like somewhat more succinctly put. And that is from an integrated model of organizational trust. Trust is a willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another party based on the expectation that the other will perform a particular action important to the truster. Trust here rests on the belief that the trustee is both competent and motivated to perform the expected action. If you would like to see that quotation written down, you can go to the bottom of this page, and in the assigned reading is a slide deck. I'd like you to look through that slide deck as a way of sort of summarizing and locking in the key contents of this video and of the text in the page below it. You do not need to draw on this video to answer any of the questions on the worksheet. Just try to get a sense of what are the 4 places that trust breaks down. Okay, so the 4 places that trust breaks down are sort of baked into the definition of trust itself. So if trust is about 2 people who have a shared expectation that I should be able to rely on you to do something. The example I give in the PowerPoint is that I, Liz, rely on my colleague Nancy Winfrey to give me honest and constructive feedback about my pedagogy, because I believe that she is motivated by concern for excellence in teaching, because she's an expert in pedagogy, and that for the same reason, she is competent to offer that expertise. Okay, so that's an example of what trust looks like. So trust can break down in any of the following places. We might not have the shared expectation about what we owe each other. So for instance, I might trust Nancy to give me feedback that is constructive and supportive, and she just feels like I just need to give it accurately. Like it's your job to figure out what to do with it, but it's just my job to give you a feedback that is accurate, right? So that would be sorry, I'm getting my breakdowns out of order. That would be normative disagreement. I believe that one person believes that they actually owe the party something other than, there's a disagreement about what they owe. A different problem would be ignorance. The fact that, not that Nancy disagrees with my expectations, she just doesn't know that I have them. Like, so let's say Nancy knows that I really want her to be kind and gentle in offering feedback, but she's like, no, I'm gonna tell it to you straight. That's normative disagreement. If she just doesn't know that I have this expectation, for me, politeness is really important and gentleness is really important, but she just doesn't know me that well. So she doesn't know that that's a really big deal to me. That would be ignorance. That's where the trust breaks down. We don't have the same expectations. Another place that trust could break down is that the person I trust might just not be able to offer the feedback. So Nancy Winfrey is a very skilled teacher, and she can give me good pedagogical feedback. But if I asked, say, my very wise sister, who is a physician and has no experience teaching, she just won't be able to give me feedback. So, there might be a trust breakdown because she didn't, or perhaps I asked Nancy, who is in general competent, but she's sick and maybe her, let's imagine her blood pressure medicine is off. I don't know if Nancy takes blood pressure medicine, but just imagine that she's kind of loopy and she can't answer my questions, or she's completely overwhelmed at work. Her bandwidth is just completely shot. And so she's not able to meet this expectation because she just doesn't have the time that is required to live into it. That's one way that trust might break down. And then the last is motivation. So let's say Nancy, for whatever reason, let's say she was profoundly depressed, and or let's say that she was just 10 minutes away from retirement and she just could not be bothered. Right? Like that's a different way that she could fulfill the request, but she doesn't want to. Those are all places that trust routinely breaks down. And for one reason or another, people do not fulfill each other's normative expectations. And those, as we will explore further down the line, can be a real source of conflict. Now, the sort of logical flip side of this is that if those are the 4 places that trust breaks down, those are also the 4 places that trust can be rebuilt. So build understanding, like just say, here's what I expect out loud to another person so that they know what I would like is feedback that is constructive and given in as gentle a tone as you can give it. They may or may not, if you move to the next one, they may not normatively agree that that is something that they're willing to do, but then at least they will understand it. They might, however, come to some normative, they might say like, look, I don't have time to give it to you in the really gentle format, but can we just agree that I think you're a good teacher and I'm going to give it to you as quickly as possible? And you might go, okay. In that case, you would be reaching normative agreement about your expectation of the form that feedback took. Next, if you recognize your person is not able to fulfill your normative expectations because they don't have the resources, you might say something like, hey, is there something I could take off your plate? Because I would really value your feedback, but I understand that you don't have the time necessary to do it right now. And therefore, you would give them the resources they need to live into your expectation. And then last but not least, you might try to, and motivation is hard, but you might find some way to motivate them. And you might do it simply by making an appeal to their concern for you. This gets back to an earlier discussion of whether the relationship is motivated by reciprocal concern and respect for each other's dignity and a willingness to be held accountable, or whether it's whether someone is motivated by carrots and sticks. So you might say, I'll pay you to do it, which would not necessarily promote trust in the fullest sense of the word, but it would at least let you rely on the person. Or you could say something like, I just have so much respect for you as a teacher, and this would be really helpful to me, and I need the help. In which case you would be appealing to their concern for you as a person. Okay, so those are 4 places that trust breaks down, 4 places to rebuild trust. Hang tight and we'll go to the next video.